Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mendoza Dialogues. I'm Peter Ashley, the Director of Marketing Communications for Mendoza, and I'm pleased to be serving again as host for today's discussion on college athletics. We're coming to you today from the Compton Family Ice Arena on Notre Dame's campus. And I'm pleased to introduce today's special guest, Notre Dame's Vice President and Athletics Director, Jack Swarbrick. Jack graduated magna cum laude from Notre Dame in 1976 and earned his law degree from Stanford in 1980. In addition to serving as Notre Dame's Athletics Director since 2008, Jack teaches sports media and management in Mendoza's MBA program. During his tenure, Jack has had a significant impact, launching Fighting Irish digital media, extending the university's relationship with NBC Sports through the 2025 football season, cementing a 10-year relationship with the apparel company Under Armour, and spearheading our entry into the ACC. That's quite a list of accomplishments. Welcome to Mendoza Dialogues, Jack. Thanks for being here.
Oh, thanks. It's great to be with you.
I understand Notre Dame has a great affinity for people attending Notre Dame and being pulled back to serve in some way. I want you to walk me through the law degree from Stanford, going from that point in 1980 to running our athletics program in 2008. Can you share a little about that?
Well, it does have Notre Dame woven throughout it. When I was trying to decide upon graduation where I would come to work, a conversation with a Holy Cross priest that I'd gotten to know at Notre Dame who was studying out at Cal turned out to be an important part of that decision. Father Tom Stella and I had a dinner conversation and talking about our futures, and through that conversation I really came to focus on what motivated me the most was a desire to contribute to my community. I thought I could do that best in the Midwest, the nature of Midwest communities, my familiarity with Indianapolis. And so as opposed to staying on the West Coast, I came back to Indianapolis, joined a firm with a legendary commitment to community service, and began practice. And through a long and winding road, after 28 years of that, I wound up here.
So what drew you to athletics management and sports management in general?
Sheer accident. I always think that the lawyers who do their job the best are the ones that follow their practice rather than try and lead it. And through a series of requests for assistance from people I had gotten to know in the community, people I had met volunteering in sports events, my practice gravitated toward a sports law and management practice. It wasn't an intentional act.
Divine intervention, maybe.
Absolutely.
Right. So in terms of our athletic program, it's obviously, from an external view, is a very strong program. The men's and women's basketball team had great seasons. Heartbreaking loss with the men against Kentucky, but a fantastic season in general. The women's team in the Final Four. What are your thoughts, from your vantage point, on the state of the athletics program, and where do you see it in the future? Well,
we're coming off the statistically best year in the history of the program, and that the stars aligned in a sense that you have so many good performances across your teams. Finished third in the Directors' Cup, won the Capital One Cup as the indicator of the best men's program in the country. And all of that success led the country in graduation success rate. Reflects a lot of things coming together that we focused on several years ago to try and take that next step as a program. And I guess what I'd say to you is I think we'll stay up in that echelon. I think we will consistently compete for national championships, both team and individual, across many of our sports.
So what are the kinds of things, you mentioned that some things specifically were done, intentionally done to move it forward. Can you share some of the things that you focused on to move it forward?
Well, the first is impacting the culture. When you come into any business, one of the challenges you have is to examine the culture and identify how you want to see it change. And one of the things we tried to be more explicit about was our goal of pursuing competitive excellence. Not being afraid to articulate that on an annual basis we're going to do our planning from the perspective of what do we need to do to win a national championship in every one of our sports. We won't do that, but if you don't start your planning from that perspective, you won't get there. Secondly was supporting that effort through the various things that we provide centrally, which are so critical to our success: strength conditioning, medical services, nutrition, sports psychology. I think we've taken a significant step forward in all of those and support our teams more effectively. And then last was being better advocates for our own program, and that reflects our investment in digital media. As the landscape of media has changed, and you can't rely on third parties to communicate your story so much anymore, traditional newspaper, television networks, you need to take on that responsibility to do it yourself. And so we did, and have aggressively told the story of Notre Dame athletics through Fighting Irish digital media.
So what has been the impact of that generally? I mean, it's been huge. So how would you characterize that impact, and what's coming in the future of Fighting Irish digital media?
Well, I think it has been huge. I think it on the most granular level, it helps keep our families involved and engaged because they can watch our competitions. It's good for recruiting. But more importantly, it extends the brand of the university. It gives us opportunities. We use it principally for storytelling. We stream a fair number of games, and we'll give you the news of the day relative to our sports programs, but our focus is storytelling, to make sure the remarkable accomplishments of our student athletes and coaches are known widely. And that really has helped people understand our programs better, but also what distinguishes us from many other places.
So in terms of strategy and decisions, you've made a lot of big decisions these past 7 years. One of them, no doubt, is the move to the ACC. Having grown up in Chapel Hill and grew up a Tar Heel fan, I'm excited because now I have two teams to root for against Duke. But my question is, what drove that decision, and how do you think that has been playing out for the teams?
You know, that was one of the most interesting strategic and business challenges I've ever faced in my life, because you were dealing in such a fluid market. The landscape was changing regularly. There was a lot of misinformation available to you that you had to be careful not to be swayed by. And we were in a very unique position because we knew there was a risk that any decision we made would have very significant consequences for others. It's the nature of Notre Dame. And so we didn't want to act precipitously, but we didn't want to be the last one standing in a game of musical chairs when the music stopped. So finding the right time, understanding the environment really became critical. We couldn't have possibly known it at the time, but as I look back on it from this perspective, I think we had a window of about 7 days to get it right. And if we had missed it on either side, I think we would have been in a difficult circumstance. I'd like to take credit for that, but luck is always a factor. The other thing we had to do in that was keep in close contact with our colleagues, gather information any place you could from anybody to try and separate what was real in the marketplace from what was bad data.
So do you feel like it's been a successful move so far? It's only been about a year, right? A year and a half?
Yeah, a little longer than that. It's, yeah, well, I can't tell you how pleased we are. Everything we had hoped to achieve through that affiliation has been realized and more. They have been great partners. It's not easy to bring a new school into a conference and accommodate all the scheduling issues, especially given our unique relationship in football. The ACC has been phenomenal in the way they've worked with us. We pursued it largely because it was a great cultural fit, and the growth of our relationship with those peer institutions has been an important byproduct. And finally, it's raised our game. We knew we were moving into a conference that would demand more of us, and that's what our coaches and student athletes love, is that challenge, and we responded to it with our best performances ever.
That's terrific. Under Armour, that's another fascinating deal that was made. I think it's such a tangible thing to think about. All my kids now have to get Notre Dame Under Armour sweatshirts now. So other than that big change, what drove that deal? What can you share about that deal? And again, how is it going so far?
Well, it's been a phenomenal success for us. We love working with Under Armour. Their support of us and our programs, we couldn't ask for more. It was not a decision made out of any dissatisfaction with our existing partner at the time. It was just the contract was up and it was an opportunity to reconsider and really approach it from a strategic perspective. Less about are we going to have the apparel to compete in, and more about can we turn this relationship into more of a strategic partnership that advances the university's broad interest and those of athletics. And those were the factors that really helped us make the decision. Under Armour's entrepreneurial spirit, the remarkable impact of their founder, Kevin Plank, and I think what the future holds for him and his company, and their commitment to technologies that I think have direct application to us. And finally, and in some ways at the end of the day of special importance to me, was their impact in the youth market. Notre Dame tends to skew older in terms of our viewership demographics, our fan bases, a number of things. I saw a real opportunity in the fact that Under Armour skews younger to help us, and in fact we've seen that in pretty dramatic fashion.
I can vouch for that because I've got an 8 and 11-year-old who now have to wear Under Armour clothes, so it definitely skews younger.
Well, when we made the decision and shared it with the trustees, you know, we wondered about the reaction you'd get, and the dominant reaction was, well, this is good, I guess, because my grandkids are all looking for Under Armour stuff for Christmas, so it was perfect.
Right. That's great. So the other big deal that I wanted to ask you about was the further commitment of NBC Sports. We've been partners with them, I think, since '91. Obviously, it must be a good partnership to want to extend it through 2025. What has NBC Sports done for us in terms of elevating our game and brand, and frankly, what have we done to probably elevate their brand?
Yeah, it's you know, the first is an obvious one in that they give us a consistent national window for our games, and so if we were with anyone else, there'd be games that got regionalized. With NBC, it's always a national broadcast. They allow us to control the time of the broadcast, so there's some consistency. You know, our day games are going to be 3:30, and our evening games will start at 7:30 generally, or 7. So that's been a positive. But I would argue that the bigger impacts have been their broad support of the university. The What Would You Fight For ads are produced by NBC. They collaborate with us on their creation. So their willingness to help us extend the brand of the university has been a very powerful thing for us. And then I think often underlooked is their promotion of Notre Dame athletics, specifically Notre Dame football. The game broadcast is great, and it's featured, and we get great ratings, but it's the week-long promotion that leads up to it. All the times Notre Dame is mentioned on national television, that has significant value for the university. And I hope we've been a good partner to them. As Comcast has come on board and the company's grown and its assets have grown, we've provided programming to many of those assets, and we want to be a good partner whenever we can.
And in terms of the years you've been here and just in general, there's been tremendous changes in the college athletic market and field. What trends do you see coming that either excite you, maybe concern you, and just in general, some things that are coming down the pike that you think are going to be a big impact to us?
Well, we're in the eye of the hurricane, so it's hard to know how it will settle itself out, and the prediction business is especially difficult right now. I know with certainty we're in a time of unprecedented change, and so you have to manage in that environment. You have to anticipate it in the agreements you write, that there may be wholesale shifts in the representations you make to your customers and to your student athletes. And we're mindful of that, and we're doing it. Clearly, the trend to take better care of the student athletes in terms of their safety and welfare, extending additional benefits to them, I think all of that is a very good thing and will continue. But beyond that, much of it is uncertain. You know, there are a number of lawsuits pending that could have a significant impact. There's a potential for legislative intervention, and all that is hard to predict.
Well, bringing it a little closer to home, I mentioned at the beginning, we're in the Compton Ice Arena. It's a beautiful facility. What has this facility meant for Notre Dame, for hockey, in South Bend, and for the college?
Now, this is a very important facility to us. And in fact, it represented my first major decision when I came on board. There was a plan to renovate the Joyce Center where we played hockey. And I asked Father Jenkins and John Affleck Graves if I could be given the opportunity to reconsider that, because I didn't think it was a very good plan, and they were very supportive. And this was the result. And it is about being able to understand and articulate clearly the central motivations for whatever the decision is. And in this case, yes, we wanted to build a state-of-the-art facility for varsity hockey, but I believe strongly, and I brought that belief with me to the university, that athletic facilities have an opportunity to engage the community in a way very few university facilities do. Most of the young people in South Bend are not going to sleep in one of our dorms or be in our classrooms or laboratories. They can be in and experience our competition facilities, our athletic facilities. And this is the best example of that. It made little sense to me to build a hockey facility that had a single sheet of ice, because then you can't do much with it. The marginal cost of adding a second sheet of ice allows you to do youth hockey tournaments and learn to skate programs and have a curling club and recreational hockey and all those things that engage the university community and the broader community. That's why we did this, and the results have frankly been spectacular. We were optimistic about its use, and it's exceeded even our best estimates.
That's terrific. And then another thing we brought up is the course that you teach for Mendoza, which is sports media and management, I believe. Talk about that, if you would, for a moment. What you focus on in that course, the reaction you get from students. I'm sure they love having you as the faculty. It's a terrific real-world example of what's going on. So just any thoughts on that?
Well, and I enjoy doing it. I co-teach it with Ken Shanzer, the former president of NBC Sports, and Ken and I share passions. We love this industry, but we have a deep understanding of how media impacts it, and especially from a historical perspective. And so Ken did a lot of the deals that shaped the modern sports industry, and so between he and I, we share those experiences and talk about the intersection between media and athletics, and the very broad and deep impact it has. The management part of it reflects our real passion. We feel very strongly about some of the skills young people ought to have when they enter the workforce. And so we use this, the sports motif, as a way to talk about some of the things that we think are important to us for business success. We place a lot of emphasis on presentation skills, on decision making, on negotiation strategies. And so we sort of combine the two. The course culminates annually in a negotiation. We take an existing rights deal that's going to come in the next year or two and divide the class into the broadcasters and the rights holder. And we have parallel negotiations, two teams negotiating. They spend months on it and culminates in an evening-long negotiation and has some really interesting outcomes.
That's great. So this year saw the inaugural college football playoff. I know you were involved in that process. How do you think the first year went?
We were very pleased. The game was a huge success, and I think we wound up with a compelling playoff with 4 clearly deserving teams. What we could not have fully foreseen was the level of excitement which would attach to the weekly release of the rankings, and all of the programming that produced and national discussion. It added to the excitement of the college football year in a pretty dramatic way, and so that was great. This was one of the great multi-party negotiations I've ever taken part in. You had all of these folks, 12 of us, all with varying interests and perspectives, who had to try and reach an agreement. We spent 18 months doing it. We're able to maintain the collegiality throughout, find a common solution, and it was very rewarding to see that solution be received so well and work so well.
Great, and more plans for the future, I'm sure.
Yeah, I think one of the things we're very much committed to is letting this format go for a while. Not tinker with it, not make changes. It was such a success, but I think one of the mistakes we made under the BCS model was we kept tinkering with it. And it eroded confidence, frankly, because we did that. We're committed to this model, and we're going to stick with it.
That's great. Now, before we run out of time, we do have some alumni questions. Part of the format here is alumni submit questions in advance. So I have a few I wanted to ask you before we stopped, and want to make sure I get their thoughts exactly right.
Great.
All right, so Lucas Taylor, who is a 2013 MBA, wants to know, given the increase in the availability of sports analytics, what are your thoughts on whether or not the predictive outputs saturate the industry and then eventually wash each other out? Essentially the Moneyball question, is it eventually all wash out if everyone's doing it?
Well, yes, it would, but I don't think that will ever be the case. I think there are 2 reasons it won't. The ability of programs to invest in them are different. The willingness of staffs to use them, to employ them, even today in baseball. after many of the sabermetrics have been proved out, you still have programs that employ them at different levels. But I think the big difference is the ability that's still retained by the coaches to decide what to use. For all the analytics we now have, and we're investing heavily in it, they only work if you reduce it to a few things. There's not enough time to do more with it. And so the real focus for us is taking all this data, all the software applications we're now using, and get it down to a few things that'll make a difference. As Tony Dungy told me years ago, in any game, it comes down to 4 or 5 plays. That's what you're trying to impact, those 4 or 5 plays.
And everyone will probably see a slightly different take on those metrics and what metrics are important to them, so it'll always be a little different.
That's absolutely what we see right now. We see it with the sports science technology we use. So many of us are using GPS trackers for our student athletes to measure a number of performance-related things, but we're pulling very different data from it.
Interesting. Okay, that's great. All right. Another one, Tom Condon, a 1969 MBA alum, wants to know, Jack, is there any technology on the horizon that you believe might help mitigate the concussions caused in the games of football, soccer, lacrosse, etc.? Anything on the horizon that could help with that?
I can't tell you that there are equipment technologies that I've seen that I think are imminent. I think there are 3 things that are really important here. One is the diagnostics will change. For all of our focus in this area, frankly, the medical science is still pretty primitive. I've been told by people who work in the area that we're 3 to 5 years away from imaging technology, which will really let us see the concussion damage, and more importantly, to know it's been healed so that you can make an informed decision about whether the athlete goes back. Secondly, we focus a lot on how we practice and play now, especially practice. Across our sports, and people focus on football, we have concussions in hockey, soccer, lacrosse. Approach our practices, approach our training, and teaching student athletes how to play in ways that reduce the injury. And the third will be the equipment. And I think this is the most, as I say, I can't identify imminent solutions, but it's also the most interesting to me because it's got some dynamics which I think are counterintuitive. The more you encase an athlete, the more reckless they tend to be. When we allowed baseball players to wear plastic protection on their front arm, they were more willing to lean out over the plate. The safer we make helmets, safe in quotation,
the rougher they'll play.
The rougher they'll play. Rugby players tackle differently because they know they don't have the protection of a helmet. So we've got to find that balance between safety and emboldening that comes with that. I also have a personal perspective here, sort of a mania, if you will, that I think we approach the technology wrong. I think we ought to be looking at technologies which disperse energy rather than concentrate it. Motor racing has gotten so much safer because when a car crashes, it breaks into a million pieces. Right. I'm not sure we shouldn't have helmets that crack at a certain impact. A, you can see they've cracked, so you know you've had the impact, but B, they'll
well, like the
disperse
crumple
the energy.
zones in regular cars now.
Exactly.
They distribute the impact. That makes sense.
Same technology.
All right, Jeff McGowan, last one, alumni question. An 89 MBA alum wanted to know if ND basketball would be playing Marquette anytime soon. There's a bigger question here. Larger topic of non-conference scheduling, and how does this process work for basketball and football?
Yeah. Football non-conference scheduling, we're committing games now in 2025. Wow. It's a much different dynamic with our commitment to the ACC and the rivalries we're protecting of USC, Stanford, and Navy. We have incredibly limited inventory that we're spreading over a lot of schools that want to play us. We have to do that with a mind towards the college football playoff and the interest of our fans. We have to balance those. And so I want markers against various conferences for purposes of the college football playoff. We need to get SEC opponents and Big 12 opponents. Stanford and USC will always give us a Pac-12 opponent and Big 10 opponents. So notwithstanding the narrow interest that fans may have in playing Team X or Y, we have to bring all of that together. Our other sports tend to do it annually. We don't extend out years in advance for the non-conference scheduling across all our other sports. And so you're in a different dynamic. It winds up to be much more concentrated around the coaching staffs. I take the lead on football scheduling from a department perspective. For basketball and soccer and lacrosse, it tends to happen in the coach's office. Relative to Marquette, we have a very strong interest, and I can't say it'll happen this year or next, but we are committed to the Catholic schools who are members of the Big Beast that we were in to play them in future years. And so I think you can expect to see Marquette and other former Big East partners on our basketball schedules.
And so we're a big draw. Is it because they want to play the teams or they want to play the brand, in your opinion? Or both?
Yeah, it's more the brand. I mean, you know, the dynamic of the team changes from year to year.
Sure.
You know, some years a victory against us, more years than not helps you a lot in your RPI. There may be years where it doesn't. But the brand, you know, one thing we say all the time, and we see in dramatic fashion in athletics, no one's neutral about the Notre Dame brand. Part of our ratings are people tuning in to root against us. And that's okay. But that fuels interest at all the schools we go to. Consistently, you will see them have their largest crowds when we visit.
Interesting. So what we always do with our guests is give them a chance at the end to share anything that we didn't cover that you think is really relevant, the audience might want to hear, and just give you a chance to give any closing thoughts.
Well, I think as a closing thought, it's worth noting that in a time, as we indicated earlier, of unprecedented change in college athletics and uncertainty about what the future holds, I think there are two very important things to keep in mind. One is the underlying activity is too good and too valuable to go away. College athletics is not going anywhere. Its form may change, but it will be with us because of all of the great things it does in building community, extending university identity, educating young people. It will be with us. And secondly, in the midst of all this change, Notre Dame will find a way forward that doesn't compromise this university, that continues to do what Notre Dame athletics has always done, and be an extension of the university, be a way to promote the university and its mission and not be inconsistent with it.
That was truly interesting. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
It was great to be here. Thanks.
This concludes today's episode of Mendoza Dialogues. Thanks for watching. Look for another episode in the weeks ahead. Take care.